The autumn wind carried the scent of dying leaves across the Meadowbrook Valley as Dr. Catherine Mills walked out of the fertility clinic for the last time. Her hands trembled as she clutched the final consultation report, the words blurring through unshed tears. At 42, with your medical history, the chances are less than 2%. I'm sorry, Mrs. Mills, but it's time to consider other options. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The parking lot stretched endlessly before her, each empty space a reminder of the emptiness she felt inside. 5 years of treatments, countless procedures, and a marriage that had crumbled under the weight of disappointment. Now at 42, she was truly alone with nothing but shattered dreams and a bank account drained by hope. Her phone buzzed with a text from her sister. How did it go? Catherine stared at the screen, unable to find words for the finality of it all. Instead, she turned off the phone and drove aimlessly through the winding roads of rural Colorado, needing distance from everything familiar. That's when she saw the sign, Meadowbrook Ranch, help wanted, room and board included. Weathered wood stood crooked beside a gravel drive that disappeared between towering pine trees. Catherine had never worked on a ranch, had never even ridden a horse, but something about the handwritten sign called to her desperate need for a fresh start. 3 months earlier, the silence at Meadowbrook Ranch had become unbearable for Jake Morrison. He stood on the wraparound porch of the main house, watching the sun set over 2,000 acres of the most beautiful land in Colorado. At 55, he should have felt proud of what he'd built. The ranch was profitable, his cattle operation respected throughout the state, and his 5 adopted sons were thriving despite their difficult beginnings. But tonight, like every night for the past year, the accomplishments felt hollow. The boys needed more than he could give them alone, and he knew it. David, his oldest at 17, had been trying to fill the role of mother and father's helper since arriving 3 years ago. The responsibility was aging him beyond his years, stealing the carefree spirit every teenager deserved. Dad? David's voice came from behind him, followed by the screen door's familiar creak. Marcus won't eat dinner again. Says his stomach hurts, but I think he's just scared about the parent-teacher conference tomorrow. Jake turned to study his son's face, noting the worry lines that shouldn't exist on someone so young. Marcus, at 8, had been with them only 6 months, still adjusting to the concept of a permanent home after years in the foster system. The boy's anxiety manifested in mysterious stomach aches whenever anything reminded him of past disappointments with adults. I'll talk to him, Jake said, placing a hand on David's shoulder. Why don't you work on your college applications? The deadline for state scholarships is coming up. David's expression shifted, uncertainty replacing the concern. About that? Dad, I've been thinking maybe I should stay here, help you with the ranch and the boys. Tommy's only 5, and Marcus still has nightmares. Plus, there's the new kid coming next month. Jake's heart clenched. This was exactly what he'd feared. Son, we've talked about this. You're going to college. That engineering degree is going to open doors for you that I never had. But what about no buts? Jake's tone was gentle but firm. I'll figure something out. You're not sacrificing your future for my decisions. But as David reluctantly headed inside, Jake wondered if he was being naive. How could he figure something out when he'd already exhausted every option? The last 3 housekeepers had quit within weeks, unable to handle the chaos of 5 traumatized boys who tested every boundary. Nannies were either too young to command respect or too rigid to understand that these children needed healing, not just supervision. Inside the house, the familiar evening symphony was beginning. 10-year-old Lise was practicing violin in the music room, the slightly off-key notes evidence of his determination to master the instrument despite starting late. The sound mixed with 13-year-old Ethan's laughter from the living room. where he was trying to teach 5-year-old Tommy how to play chess. "Your move, little man," Ethan said patiently. "Remember what I taught you about the knight? It moves like a horse." Tommy exclaimed, his gap-toothed grin lighting up his entire face. "Low-shaped, just like Lightning's legs when he runs." Lightning was Tommy's favorite horse, a gentle mare that Jake had specifically chosen for the boys' riding lessons. Each of his sons had found their own connection to ranch life, their own way of healing from whatever trauma had brought them into the system. David excelled at mechanics, spending hours in the workshop learning to repair equipment. Luis found peace in music and in caring for the smaller animals. Ethan discovered he had a gift for teaching and patience that surprised everyone. Even Marcus, in his quiet moments, showed glimpses of artistic talent when he thought no one was. Watching Jake made his way to Marcus's room, finding the boy curled up on his bed, staring out the window at the darkening sky. The 8-year-old's room was sparse, despite Jake's encouragement to decorate and make it his own. Trust came slowly. For Marcus, and permanence was still a foreign concept. "Hey, buddy," Jake said softly, settling into the chair beside the bed. "David says you're not feeling well." Marcus's dark eyes shifted to Jake's face, then away again. "My stomach hurts." "Is it the kind of hurt that comes from being worried about something?" A long pause. Then, barely audible, "What if the teacher tells you I'm bad? What if you don't want me anymore?" Jake's throat tightened. 6 months, and Marcus still lived in fear of being sent away. "Marcus, look at me." When the boy's eyes met, Jake continued, "There is nothing, and I mean nothing, that could make me not want you anymore. You're my son now. That's not something that changes. But what if? Nope, no what ifs. Tomorrow we'll go to your conference together. And I'll probably embarrass you by telling Mrs. Peterson how proud I am of your math improvement. Then we'll get ice cream, just you and me. Sound good?" The smallest smile tugged at Marcus's lips. "Chocolate chip? Double scoop if you eat some dinner." As Jake coaxed Marcus downstairs and watched him hesitantly join his brothers at the dinner table, he felt the familiar ache in his chest. These boys deserved so much more than a single father struggling to meet everyone's needs. They deserved the kind of nurturing presence that could help them heal completely, someone who could see their potential and help them reach it. David was reheating Marcus's plate when the phone rang. Jake answered, recognizing the voice of Helen. "Crawford from the county's Family Services Department." "Jake, I wanted to give you a heads up. We have a situation with a teenager, Kevin Walsh, 15 years old, been through 4 placements this year. He's challenging. But I keep thinking about your boys and how well they're doing. Would you consider, send me his file," Jake said. Without hesitation. "When can he come?" "You don't want to think about it." "Jake, this kid has been labeled as aggressive, uncooperative. The last family said he was violent." Jake watched his sons around the dinner table. David helping Tommy cut his chicken, Lee softly humming while he ate, Ethan making Marcus laugh with silly faces, and Marcus actually eating without prompting. Sometimes the most challenging kids just need someone who won't give up on them. "You're sure? You've already got your hands full, I'm sure." "These boys are my life, Helen. What's one more?" After hanging up, Jake leaned against the kitchen counter, watching his family. Tomorrow he'd have to tell them about Kevin, prepare them for another adjustment, another brother who would need time and patience and understanding. David would worry about taking on more responsibility. The younger boys would be excited, but also anxious about sharing attention. And Jake would continue trying to be everything to everyone while knowing he was falling short. The sound of Catherine's car pulling into the gravel drive cut through his thoughts. Through the window, he could see a small sedan approaching the house, headlights cutting through the gathering darkness. He wasn't expecting anyone, but visitors weren't uncommon. Sometimes neighbors stopped by, or feed suppliers made late deliveries. "Dad, someone's here," David called from the living room. where he'd been helping Tommy with a puzzle. Jake stepped onto the porch as the car came to a stop. The engine turned off, but the driver remained inside for a long moment. When the door finally opened, a woman emerged, moving slowly as if every step required conscious effort. Even in the dim porch light, Jake could see the weariness in her posture, the way she held herself as if afraid of taking up too much space. She approached the porch steps hesitantly, and Jake got his first clear look at her face. Auburn hair pulled back in a practical ponytail, green eyes that held a depth of sadness he recognized from his own mirror, and features that spoke of intelligence and determination despite her obvious exhaustion. "I'm sorry to bother you so late," she said, her voice carrying a slight tremor. "I saw the sign about the job opening. I know it's not normal business hours, but I was driving by and..." She trailed off, as if realizing how strange her situation must seem. "Catherine Mills," she added, extending her hand. "I should probably come back tomorrow, but I thought I'd ask if the position is still available." Jake studied her face, noting the way her eyes darted toward the house, where warm light spilled from the windows and the faint sounds of his sons' voices carried on the evening air. There was something about her that reminded him of a wounded animal seeking shelter, and his instinct was to provide it. "Jake Morrison," he replied, shaking her hand. "And yes, the position is still available. Though I should warn you, it's not a typical ranch job. I have 5 sons, and we need someone who can help manage the household while I handle the ranch operations." Catherine's eyebrows rose slightly. 5 sons? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. "Adopted," Jake clarified, watching her reaction carefully. "Ages 5 to 17. They're good kids, but they've all been through tough situations. It takes a special kind of person to work with them." For the first time since arriving, Catherine's expression shifted. The wariness in her eyes was replaced by something that looked almost like hope. "I've always been good with children," she said quietly, "and I'm not afraid of tough situations." Behind them, the screen door opened and David appeared, drawn by curiosity about their visitor. "Everything okay, Dad?" "David, this is Ms. Mills. She's interested in the position we advertised." David's gaze shifted between his father and Catherine, and Jake could see the teenager's protective instincts kicking in. David had been disappointed too many times by adults who promised to help but left when things got difficult. "What kind of experience do you have with kids?" David asked directly, his tone polite but challenging. Catherine turned to face him fully, and Jake was surprised to see her straighten, some of the weariness leaving her posture. "I was a pediatric nurse for 15 years, she said. "I specialized in working with children who had experienced trauma. I know how to be patient, how to listen, and how to create safe spaces for healing." "Were you?" Jake asked, genuinely surprised. "What brings you to ranch work?" Catherine's composure faltered slightly, and she looked away. "Life changes," she said simply. "Sometimes you need to start over completely." The raw honesty in her voice struck Jake deeply. He recognized the tone of someone who had lost everything and was trying to rebuild from scratch. "Would you like to come inside, meet the others? It's getting cold out here." Catherine hesitated, glancing at her car as if considering retreat. "I don't want to impose on your family time." "You're not imposing," Jake said gently. "Besides, if you're going to work here, you should know what you're getting into." They followed David through the front door into the warm chaos of the Morrison household. Tommy immediately launched himself from the living room couch, rapping his arms around Jake's legs in his typical enthusiastic greeting. "Daddy, Ethan taught me how the horsey moves in chess, and I almost won." "Almost, huh?" Jake ruffled Tommy's hair, noting how Catherine's eyes softened as she watched the interaction. "Tommy, this is Ms. Mills. She might be coming to work with us." Tommy regarded Catherine with the frank curiosity of a 5-year-old. Do you know how to make pancakes? David burns them, and Dad makes them too thick. Catherine's first genuine smile appeared. I do know how to make pancakes. What's your favorite kind? Chocolate chip, and shaped like animals. Tommy, let Ms. Mills breathe, David said, but his tone was fond. Come on, everyone's in the kitchen. Lisa's making hot chocolate. The kitchen was the heart of the Morrison home, a large space with a farmhouse table that could seat 8 in cupboards painted a warm yellow that caught and reflected light from the vintage fixtures. Louise stood at the stove, carefully stirring a pot of cocoa while Ethan arranged marshmallows in small bowls. Marcus sat at the table, coloring in a sketchbook with intense concentration. Guys, this is Ms. Mills, Jake announced. She's interested in the job opening. Louise looked up from his stirring, offering a shy smile. Would you like some hot chocolate? I made it from scratch. That's very kind of you, Catherine replied. What's your name? Louise. I'm 10. And that's Ethan. He's 13. And Marcus is 8, but he's really good at drawing. Marcus glanced up at the mention of his name, his dark eyes studying Catherine warily before returning to his artwork. Catherine didn't push for interaction, Jake noticed, instead accepting the mug of cocoa Liz offered and settling into the KD chair David pulled out for her. So what exactly does the job involve? Catherine asked, wrapping her hands around the warm mug. Officially, household management, Jake said, taking his own seat. Meals, laundry, making sure homework gets done. And everyone gets where they need to be, unofficially ... He gestured around the table at his sons. Being part of a family that's still figuring itself out. Dad adopts kids that other people give up on, Ethan said matter-of-factly, earning a look from David. What? It's true. We were all problems. Before we came here. You were never problems, Jake said firmly. You just needed the right place to grow. Catherine observed this exchange quietly, and Jake found himself wondering what she was thinking. Most potential employees were intimidated by the scope of the job, the complexity of managing 5 children with various needs and backgrounds. But Catherine seemed to be listening with the kind of focused attention he associated with healthcare professionals. How long have you all been together? She asked. David came first 3 years ago, Jake explained. Then Lise 2 years ago. Ethan 18 months ago, Marcus 6 months ago, and Tommy 4 months ago. We're actually expecting another placement next month, a 15-year-old named Kevin. Catherine's eyebrows rose. 6 children? Is that a problem? David asked, his tone sharpening slightly. Not at all, Catherine replied calmly. I'm just impressed. That's a lot of love and energy to share. Something in her phrasing made Marcus look up from his drawing again, this time with curiosity rather than wariness. Are you sad? He asked suddenly, his child's intuition cutting straight to the heart of things. The question hung in the air for a moment. Catherine's composure wavered, and Jake saw her hands tighten around the mug. Sometimes, she said honestly. Are you? Marcus considered this seriously. Sometimes, but less than before. That's good, Catherine said softly. It's okay to be sad sometimes as long as it gets a little less. Jake felt something shift in the room's atmosphere. His sons were cautious with new adults, having learned to protect themselves from disappointment. But there was something about Catherine's gentle honesty that seemed to be reaching them. What made you sad? Tommy asked with the innocent directness of a 5-year-old. Tommy, David warned, but Catherine raised a hand slightly. It's okay. I wanted something very much for a very long time, and today I found out I can't have it. So now I need to figure out what comes next. That's why Dad says we should focus on what we can do instead of what we can't, Lise offered quietly. It's hard sometimes, but it helps. Catherine's eyes met Jake's across the table, and he saw recognition there, the understanding of someone who had also learned hard. Lessons about accepting disappointment and finding new paths forward. "That's very wise," she said to Luis. "Your dad sounds like a smart man." "He is," Tommy declared loyally. "He fixes everything and makes the best grilled cheese and teaches US about cows and horses, and he never gets mad even when Marcus had a nightmare and threw up on his favorite shirt." "Tommy," Marcus protested, his cheeks flushing red. "It's okay," Jake said quickly. "Accidents happen. That's what washing machines are for." Catherine was watching this interaction with fascination, and Jake realized she was seeing something many people missed: the way his family had learned to support each other through difficulties, the natural resilience that developed when children felt truly safe. "The job comes with room and board," he continued, "plus a salary that's competitive with management positions in town. There's a guest house about 50 yards from the main house. Your own space, but close enough to help when needed." "What happened to the last person who had the job?" Catherine asked. "We've never actually filled it before," Jake admitted. "I've been trying to manage everything myself, but with Kevin coming and David needing to focus on college applications, ... He trailed off, realizing how impossible his situation must sound. "You've been doing all of this alone?" Catherine asked, looking around the table at the 5 boys who were clearly thriving, despite their difficult backgrounds. "Dad's really good at it," Ethan said proudly. "But he doesn't sleep much, and sometimes he forgets to eat lunch because he's making sure we have everything we need." "Ethan," Jake protested mildly, "it's true. And you've been working on the barn roof for 6 months because you keep stopping to help us with homework or drive someone to appointments." Catherine was quiet for a long moment, studying the family dynamics playing out before her. Finally, she asked, "When would you need me to start? You're interested?" David asked, surprise evident in his voice. "I think I am," Catherine said slowly. "But I should be honest, I've never worked on a ranch before. I don't know anything about cattle or horses or farm equipment." "That's not really what we need," Jake said. "We need someone who understands kids, who won't give up when things get difficult, who can help create stability while everyone adjusts and grows." "I can do that," Catherine said with quiet confidence. "I know how to help children feel safe. I know how to create routines that work. And I'm very good at not giving up." The conversation was interrupted by the sound of a timer going off. Luis jumped up to check something in the oven, revealing a tray of perfectly golden dinner rolls. "I made these for tomorrow's lunches," he explained, "but we could have them now if Ms. Mills wants to try one." "That would be wonderful," Catherine said, accepting the warm roll Louise offered. "Did you make these from scratch?" "Louise is our baker," Ethan explained proudly. "He makes the best bread in the county." As Catherine bit into the roll, her expression registered genuine surprise and delight. "This is incredible, Luis. You're very talented." The boy beamed at the praise, and Jake noted how Catherine's appreciation seemed completely natural and unforced. Many adults either ignored his son's accomplishments or offered hollow praise. Catherine's response felt authentic. "If you took the job," Marcus said suddenly, "would you stay? Even if we're difficult sometimes?" The question silenced the table. Jake's heart broke a little at the vulnerability in his son's voice, the fear that still lived just beneath the surface despite months of stability. Catherine turned to face Marcus fully. "I don't know what difficult means to you," she said carefully, "but I've worked with children who were scared, angry, sad, confused, and hurting. I've never met a child who was truly difficult. Just children who needed help figuring out how to feel safe again." "Even if someone has nightmares every night?" Marcus pressed. "Especially then. Nightmares usually mean your brain is trying to work through something scary. It's actually a sign that you're getting stronger, not weaker." Marcus stared at her for a long moment, then returned to his drawing. But Jake noticed the boy's shoulders had relaxed slightly, as if some invisible burden had lessened. "The position includes health insurance and 2 weeks paid vacation," Jake continued. plus use of one of the ranch vehicles when needed. The guest house is fully furnished, but you're welcome to bring your own things. Make it feel like home. What about the ranch work itself? What would I need to learn? Nothing immediately, Jake assured her. The boys help with age-appropriate chores, feeding chickens, collecting eggs, basic horse care. David's learning equipment maintenance. But the actual cattle operations, that's my department. Though if you wanted to learn, Dad's a really good teacher, Tommy piped up. He taught me how to ride Lightning, and I was scared at first, but now I'm not. You have horses? Catherine asked, a flicker of something, interest, nervousness, crossing her face. Several. Part of teaching responsibility and building confidence. Don't worry, we wouldn't throw you on a horse your first day, Jake said with a smile as the evening continued. Jake found himself observing Catherine carefully. She listened more than she spoke, asked thoughtful questions, and seemed genuinely interested in each of his sons as individuals. When Tommy began showing signs of tiredness, she noticed immediately and suggested he might be ready for bed without being pushy about it. When Luce mentioned a school project he was worried about, she offered specific suggestions based on her understanding of child development. Most importantly, she didn't try too hard. Many potential caregivers came on too strong, overwhelming the boys with false enthusiasm and promises they couldn't keep. Catherine was calm, steady, and real in a way that his sons were clearly responding to. I should probably let you all get to your evening routines, Catherine said eventually. It's getting late, and I'm sure tomorrow is a school day. It is, David confirmed, beginning to clear the table. But this was nice. It's been a while since we had a visitor who actually wanted to hear about our lives. As Catherine prepared to leave, Jake walked her to her car. The night air was crisp and clear, filled with the sounds of cattle settling in distant fields and the whisper of wind through pine trees. They're wonderful boys, Catherine said, pausing beside her car door. You should be very proud. I am. But I also know they deserve more than I can give them alone. Catherine was quiet for a moment, looking back at the house where warm light spilled from the windows and the faint sounds of his sons' voices carried on the evening air. They seem pretty happy to me. They are mostly. But happiness and thriving aren't always the same thing. David's sacrificing his own future to help me hold things together. Marcus still has nightmares every night. Tommy needs more individual attention than I can give him while managing everything else. And Kevin ... Jake shook his head. Kevin's going to need more patience and understanding than I have left some days. Why do you do it? Catherine asked suddenly. Adopt children that other people consider too difficult? Jake considered the question, one he'd been asked many times by social workers, neighbors, and well-meaning friends. Because someone did it for me once, he said finally. I aged out of the foster system at 18 with nowhere to go and no real skills. A rancher named Henry Caldwell took a chance on me, taught me everything I know about this life. When he died, he left me this place. Said I should use it to help other kids who needed a chance. So this ranch has always been about second chances, third, and fourth chances for some of my boys, however many it takes. Catherine smiled, and Jake realized it was the first time all evening her expression had been entirely free of sadness. I like that philosophy. Does that mean you're interested in the position? It means I'd like to try. If you're willing to take a chance on someone who needs a fresh start as much as your sons do. Jake extended his hand, and Catherine shook it firmly. Welcome to Meadowbrook Ranch, Catherine Mills. Can you start Monday? I'll be here. As Catherine drove away, Jake stood in his driveway watching her taillights disappear around the bend. For the first time in months, the weight on his shoulders felt slightly lighter. He didn't know Catherine's full story yet, didn't understand what had brought her to his door looking so lost and broken. But he recognized something in her that matched what he saw in his sons, the determination to heal, to grow, to build something better from the pieces of what had been shattered. Inside the house, David was supervising the evening cleanup while his younger brothers prepared for bed. The familiar routines continued, but Jake sensed a new energy in the air, a feeling of possibility that hadn't been there that morning. "So?" David asked as Jake entered the kitchen. "What do you think?" "I think she might be exactly what we need," Jake replied. "What did you guys think?" "She's nice," Tommy called from the living room, where he was gathering his toys. "And she knows about pancakes." "She didn't talk down to us," Louise added thoughtfully. "Some adults do that, like we're too young to understand things." "She understood." "About the nightmares," Marcus said quietly, appearing in the doorway. "She didn't say I should just try not to have them." Ethan nodded agreement. "And she actually listened when we talked about our projects and stuff. Like she cared about the answers." David remained cautious. "She seems okay." "But people can seem okay at first. Remember Mrs. Henderson?" Mrs. Henderson had been a housekeeper candidate who had charmed Jake during the interview, but had proven to be impatient and dismissive with the boys when she thought he wasn't watching. "You're right to be careful," Jake said. "But my gut feeling is good about this one. And you know what? If it doesn't work out, we'll figure something else out. We always do." As Jake tucked Tommy into bed and checked on the older boys, he found himself thinking about Catherine's question. "Why do you do it?" The simple answer was that he'd been lucky enough to receive help when he needed it most, and he believed in paying that forward. The more complex answer involved understanding what it felt like to be unwanted, to be seen as too much trouble, to wonder if anyone would ever choose to love you. Each of his sons had arrived at Meadowbrook Ranch carrying invisible wounds, convinced they were unlovable or unfixable. Jake's job was to prove them wrong, to create a space where they could heal and grow and become whoever they were meant to be. It was challenging work, sometimes heartbreaking work, but it was also the most important thing he'd ever done. Now, Catherine Mills was joining their mission, bringing her own wounds and her own need for healing. Jake suspected that in helping his sons, she might find a way to heal herself. And in return, her presence might give his boys something they'd been missing, the nurturing maternal energy that he, despite his best efforts, couldn't provide. Alone. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Kevin Walsh would arrive next month with his own complicated needs. David still needed to focus on college applications. Marcus's nightmares hadn't disappeared. Tommy required more individual attention than the chaos of a large family always allowed. Louis needed encouragement for his musical talents. Ethan was struggling with feeling caught between childhood and adolescence. But tonight, for the first time in months, Jake fell asleep feeling hopeful about the future. Meadowbrook Ranch was about to become home to one more person seeking a second chance, and Jake had a feeling that Catherine Mills might be the missing piece their family had been waiting for. The wind outside carried the promise of winter's approach, but inside the warm walls of the main house, 6 hearts, soon to be 7, beat with the steady rhythm of belonging. Tomorrow would begin a new chapter in the Morrison family story, one that started with a lonely woman driving past a weathered sign and a rancher willing to believe that sometimes the most broken people were exactly what a healing family needed. Monday. Morning arrived with a crisp October chill that painted frost across the pasture gates. Catherine sat in her car at the end of Jake's driveway, hands gripping the steering wheel as doubt crept through her resolve. Through the windshield, she could see the main house coming alive with morning activity, shadows moving past windows, the glow of kitchen lights, smoke rising from the chimney. What was she doing here? 3 days ago, she'd been Dr. Catherine Mills, a respected pediatric nurse with 15 years of experience in Denver's Children's Hospital. Now she was about to become a ranch housekeeper for a man she'd met once and 5 children, who had every reason to be suspicious of new adults in their lives. Her phone buzzed with another message from her sister Rachel. Mom's worried sick. Please call and let us know you're okay. Catherine had sent one brief text a day explaining she'd taken a job in rural Colorado, but she hadn't been ready for the inevitable questions and concerns. Her family meant well, but they didn't understand that staying in Denver, surrounded by reminders of her failed marriage and abandoned dreams, felt like drowning slowly. A tap on her passenger window startled her from her thoughts. David Morrison stood beside her car, dressed in work clothes and boots, a steaming travel mug in his hand. Catherine rolled down the window, catching the rich aroma of coffee mixed with the clean scent of mountain air. Dad sent me to check if you were having second thoughts, David said, his tone carefully neutral. He figured you might be sitting out here wondering what you've gotten yourself into. Something like that, Catherine admitted, appreciating his directness. Is it that obvious? You've been parked here for 10 minutes. Either you're having doubts, or you're really into morning meditation. David's slight smile took the edge off his words. For what it's worth, Dad's been up since 5:30 making sure everything's ready for your first day. He cleaned out the guest house yesterday, stocked it with groceries, even put fresh flowers on the kitchen table. Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at this unexpected kindness. He didn't need to do all that. Yeah, he did. That's just who he is. David's expression grew more serious. Look, I know this situation is weird. Most people think Dad's crazy for taking in so many kids, especially ones with problems. But he's good at it, and he's good to us. If you're here because you need this as much as we do, then welcome to the chaos. If you're here because you feel sorry for us or think it'll be easy money, you should probably drive away now. The 17-year-olds. Protective honesty struck Catherine deeply. I'm here because I need to believe I can still be useful to someone. Your family seems to need help, and I need purpose. That feels like a fair trade. David studied her face for a moment, then nodded. Fair enough. Come on. Let's get you started before the younger boys finish breakfast and decide to interrogate you about everything from your favorite color to whether you believe in aliens. Catherine followed David toward the house, noting how naturally he moved through his responsibilities. He checked on the horses as they passed the corral, made sure the gate latched properly behind them, and picked up a stray feed bucket without breaking stride. At 17, he carried himself with the quiet competence of someone who'd learned early that reliability mattered. The kitchen was bustling with organized morning chaos when they entered. Louise stood at the stove flipping pancakes with surprising skill for a 10-year-old, while Ethan helped Tommy tie his shoes and gather school supplies. Marcus sat at the table, methodically eating his breakfast while sketching in a notebook. Jake moved between them all like a conductor orchestrating a complex symphony, checking homework, signing permission slips, and making sure everyone had what they needed. Ms. Mills. Tommy spotted her first, abandoning his shoelaces to wrap his arms around her waist in an enthusiastic hug. You came back. Dad made pancakes, but Louise made them better because Dad burns the edges sometimes. Hey now, Jake protested mildly, ruffling Tommy's hair. My pancakes have character. That's what you call burned? Ethan grinned, dodging his father's playful swat. Catherine felt some of her nervousness ease at the family's natural warmth. Good morning, everyone. Luce, those pancakes smell amazing. I added vanilla and cinnamon, Louise said proudly, sliding perfectly golden pancakes onto a plate. Would you like some? I made extra. That's very thoughtful, thank you. As Catherine accepted the plate, Jake appeared beside her with a steaming mug. Coffee, cream, no sugar, right? David mentioned you had some yesterday. You remembered, Catherine said, surprised by the small gesture. Part of the job description for living with 5 kids, Jake replied with a smile. Remembering the details that matter to people. The morning routine flowed around Catherine as she observed the family dynamics. Each boy had specific responsibilities. Louise handled breakfast preparation, Ethan helped Tommy with getting ready. David checked that everyone's backpacks were properly packed. Marcus fed the cats that appeared hopefully at the back door. Jake moved through it all like a master choreographer, guiding without micromanaging, encouraging without nagging. "What time do you need to leave for school?" Catherine asked, noting the efficient but unhurried pace. "Bus comes at 7:45, Ethan explained, checking the kitchen clock. "Louise and I walk to the end of the driveway. Tommy rides the little kid bus that comes later, and David drives himself. Marcus ... double quote. He paused, glancing at his younger brother. "Marcus gets driven to school because the bus is too loud for him, right?" Now, Catherine caught the careful phrasing, the way the family adapted to Marcus's needs without making him feel different or broken. "Sensory sensitivity?" she asked quietly. Jake nodded. "Among other things, his previous placement WSN single quotes T ... understanding about his needs. We're working with a therapist to help him feel more comfortable in group situations. That's smart. Trauma can manifest in lots of different ways. You know about trauma responses in children?" Marcus looked up from his drawing, his dark eyes curious rather than wary. "I do. I worked with a lot of kids who had scary experiences. Everyone's brain handles scary things differently, but that doesn't mean there's anything wrong with your brain." Marcus considered this seriously. "Mrs. Patterson at my old school said I was being difficult on purpose." Catherine felt anger flash through her at the casual cruelty of that statement. Mrs. Patterson was wrong. When children have big reactions to things, it's usually because their brain is trying to keep them safe. Sometimes our brains get confused about what's actually dangerous. Like how I used to hide under my bed when people raised their voices. Marcus asked, "Exactly like that. Your brain was protecting you based on past experiences. That's actually pretty smart, even if it didn't feel good." The conversation was interrupted by the distant sound of a diesel engine. "That's the bus," Louise announced, grabbing his backpack and giving Jake a quick hug. "See you after school, Dad. Bye, Ms. Mills." Ethan followed suit, pausing to shake Catherine's hand formally. "Welcome to Meadowbrook Ranch, Ms. Mills. Try not to let Dad work you too hard on your first day." As the older boys headed out, Jake began preparing Tommy's breakfast while the 5-year-old chattered about his plans for show and tell. Catherine watched Jake's patient responses to Tommy's endless questions and requests, noting how he gave each child individual attention, even in the midst of morning chaos. "Tommy's bus doesn't come for another hour," Jake explained to Catherine. "That gives us time to go over the household routines before I drive Marcus to school." The next hour provided Catherine with insight into the enormous scope of Jake's daily responsibilities. He showed her the elaborate scheduling system he'd developed to track 5 different school schedules, medical appointments, therapy sessions, and extracurricular activities. The kitchen bulletin board was covered with permission slips, school calendars, and appointment reminders. "David has SAT prep on Tuesday and Thursday evenings," Jake explained, pointing to the color-coded calendar. "Louise has violin lessons on Wednesdays and Saturday mornings. Ethan has counseling every other Thursday. He's working through some issues from his last placement. Marcus sees his therapist on Mondays and Fridays, plus he has art therapy on Saturday afternoons. Tommy goes to pre-K 3 days a week and has speech therapy twice a week to help with some pronunciation issues." Catherine stared at the calendar, overwhelmed by the complexity of coordinating so many different needs. "How do you keep track of all this?" "Very carefully," Jake said with a rueful smile. "And I've gotten really good at contingency planning. When one kid gets sick or has a crisis, everything else has to shift. What happens when you get sick?" Jake paused in his explanation, looking genuinely puzzled by the question. "I don't really get sick. Everyone gets sick sometimes." "Not everyone has 5 kids depending on them for everything." Jake's tone was matter-of-fact rather than self-pitying. "I'll rest when they're all grown up and settled." Catherine recognized the mindset of someone who'd convinced himself he didn't have the luxury of human limitations. She'd seen it in parents of chronically ill children, in single mothers working multiple jobs, in anyone who'd learned that other people's needs had to come before their own survival. It was unsustainable, but pointing that out rarely helped. Instead, she focused on learning the systems Jake had created. The laundry rotation that ensured clean clothes for 5 growing boys. The meal planning that accommodated different dietary needs and preferences. The homework supervision that recognized each child's learning style and attention span. The bedtime routines that helped traumatized children feel safe and settled. "You've created something remarkable here," Catherine said as they finished the kitchen tour. "This level of organization and attention to individual needs, it's impressive." "It's survival," Jake corrected. "When you have this many kids with complex backgrounds, structure isn't optional. They need to know what to expect, need to feel secure in the routines." Tommy's bus arrival interrupted their conversation, and Catherine watched Jake's gentle send-off. With his youngest son, the 5-year-old received individual attention, specific encouragement for his day ahead, and the reassurance that someone would be waiting when he came home. "Now for the Marcus school run," Jake said, checking his watch. "Want to come along? It'll give you a chance to see how that routine works." The drive to Marcus's school provided Catherine with insight into the 8-year-old's ongoing struggles. Marcus sat in the back seat clutching a worn stuffed bear, his body tense with anticipation. Jake kept up a gentle stream of conversation, reminding Marcus about the positive things that had happened at school recently, the friends he was making, the teacher who understood his needs. "Remember, if you start feeling overwhelmed, you can ask Mrs. Garcia to use the quiet space," Jake said as they pulled into the school parking lot. "And if you need me to pick you up early, that's okay too. What if I have another bad day?" Marcus asked quietly. "Then we'll figure out what went wrong and how to make tomorrow better. That's what we do, right? We don't give up. We just keep trying different things until something works." Catherine watched Jake walk Marcus to the school entrance, noting how he crouched down to the boys' level for their goodbye conversation, how he waited until Marcus was safely inside before returning to the truck. The entire interaction spoke of patience, understanding, and the kind of deep commitment that couldn't be faked. "He's lucky to have you," Catherine said as they drove back toward the ranch. "I'm the lucky one," Jake replied. "Each of these kids has taught me something important about resilience, about finding strength in difficult circumstances. Marcus is incredibly brave, even when he doesn't feel like it." "How long was he in the system before coming to you?" 3 years. His parents died in a car accident when he was 5, and he went to live with an aunt who wasn't prepared for a traumatized child. She tried to make him normal through punishment and criticism. By the time he came to me, he barely spoke and had panic attacks whenever an adult raised their voice. Catherine felt her heart clench at the description. "And now? Now he talks to me about his feelings, creates beautiful art, and only hides under the bed when there are thunderstorms. Still working on that last one." The guest house Jake had prepared for Catherine was a charming 1-bedroom cottage with pine walls, handmade furniture, and windows that looked out over the pastures. True to David's word, fresh flowers sat on the kitchen table, and the refrigerator was stocked with essentials. "This is beautiful," Catherine said, running her hand along the smooth surface of a hand-carved dining table. "Did you make this furniture?" "David. And I made most of it together." Good way to teach woodworking skills and patience at the same time. Jake opened the curtains to let in more light. "The internet's already set up, and there's a phone line if you need it. You're welcome to eat meals with us in the main house, or you can cook here if you prefer privacy sometimes." "Thank you, this is more than I expected. You're taking on more than most people would be willing to handle. Seemed fair to make sure you're comfortable." They spent the rest of the morning with Jake showing Catherine the ranch operations. He introduced her to the horses, explaining each animal's personality and role in helping the boys develop confidence and responsibility. Lightning, Tommy's gentle mare, nickered softly when Catherine approached her stall. "She's beautiful, Catherine." Sod, reaching out cautiously to stroke the horse's neck. "I've never been around horses much." "Lightning's a good one to start with. She's patient with beginners, kids especially." Tommy was terrified of her when he first arrived, but now they're best friends. They moved through the barn systematically, Jake explaining the daily care routines, the feeding schedules, the safety protocols that kept both children and animals protected. Catherine found herself fascinated by the complexity of ranch operations, the way every task connected to larger goals of teaching responsibility and building character. "The boys each have age-appropriate chores," Jake explained as they checked on the chickens. "Tommy collects eggs and helps fill water bowls. Marcus feeds the cats and brushes the gentler horses. Louise manages the chicken coop and helps with basic equipment maintenance. Ethan handles more complex animal care and assists with fence repairs. David's learning heavy equipment operation and helps with cattle management. And Kevin, when he arrives," Jake's expression grew thoughtful. "Kevin's going to be a challenge. He's been failed by the system repeatedly, so his trust in adults is basically non-existent. I'm thinking we'll start him with something solitary but important. Maybe managing the hay storage or maintaining the tool shed. Give him space to prove to himself that he can succeed at something before we ask him to work closely with others." Catherine admired Jake's strategic thinking about each child's needs. "You've really thought this through. I've had to. These kids arrive with so much pain and anger and fear. If I can't give them ways to feel successful and valued, they'll never believe they deserve to be here." The sound of vehicles approaching drew their attention back toward the house. Catherine checked her watch, surprised to realize the morning had flown by. "That'll be the school calling for an early pickup," Jake said, recognizing the principals car. "Marcus must be having a difficult day." But it wasn't about Marcus. The principal, a kind-faced woman in her 50s, emerged from her car with a serious expression. "Jake, I'm sorry to bother you, but we need to talk about David." Catherine felt Jake tense beside her. "What happened?" "There was an incident this morning. Another student made some comments about your family situation, called the boys charity cases, and suggested David was only successful because you give him special treatment." "David? Well, he defended his brothers with more passion then. Was probably wise. Is he hurt?" Jake's voice was tight with concern. "Physically, no. But he's suspended for the rest of the week. Zero tolerance policy for fighting, even when the fight was justified." Jake ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in his posture. "Where is he now?" "In my office, waiting for you." "Jake, for what it's worth, the other boy started it. And his comments were completely inappropriate. But David threw the first punch, so my hands are tied on the suspension." As they drove to the school, Catherine observed Jake's internal struggle. His protective instincts were warring with his need to maintain David's respect for authority and school rules. She could see him working through how to handle the situation fairly while still supporting his son. "What are you thinking?" Catherine asked quietly. "I'm thinking David's been carrying too much responsibility for too long, and it's starting to show in ways that worry me," Jake replied. "He feels like he has to defend the family honor because he sees himself as my partner in this rather than my son." "That's my fault." "How is that your fault?" "Because I've leaned on him too heavily. He helps with everything, the younger boys, the ranch work, the household management. I've made him feel responsible for everyone's well-being, and now he's fighting other kids who insult his brothers." Catherine considered this as they pulled into the school parking lot. Or maybe he's just a 17-year-old boy who loves his family and couldn't stand hearing them insulted. Sometimes the simplest explanation is the right one. The conversation with David revealed a young man struggling with anger and frustration. He'd been suppressing for months. Sitting in the principal's office, his knuckles bruised and his jaw set in stubborn lines, he looked far older than his 17 years. "Tell me what happened," Jake said, settling into the chair beside his son. Tyler Brennan started, running his mouth about how we're all damaged goods, and you only keep us around for the government checks. Then he said Tommy's probably going to end up in juvenile detention by the time he's 10, because that's what happens to those kinds of kids. Jake's face darkened at the description, but his voice remained calm. And then I hit him." David's tone was defiant. "I'd do it again too. Nobody talks about my brothers like that." "David." "No, Dad. I know you're going to tell me violence doesn't solve anything, and fighting gets me suspended, and—" I should have walked away. But I couldn't walk away from someone saying those things about Tommy and Marcus and Louise and Ethan. They're good kids, and they deserve better than being called damaged goods. Catherine watched Jake's face cycle through multiple emotions: pride at David's loyalty, concern about the violence, frustration with the situation, and what looked like guilt over the burden his son was carrying. "You're right that your brothers deserve better than cruel comments," Jake said finally. "And I'm proud that you want to defend them. But son, you can't fight every person who says something ignorant about our family. You'll spend your whole life angry. So I'm just supposed to let people say whatever they want?" "You're supposed to remember that people who say things like that are showing their own ignorance and insecurity. Tyler Brennan's opinion of our family doesn't change who we are or what we mean to each other." David's defiance cracked slightly. "It just makes me so angry, Dad. These kids don't know anything about what Marcus went through, or how brave Tommy is, or how hard Louise works at everything. They see us and make assumptions based on stupid stereotypes." "I know it's hard," Jake said gently. "But you can't control what other people think or say. You can only control how you respond." The drive home was quiet, David staring out the window, while Jake focused on the road. Catherine found herself thinking about family dynamics, about the pressure on the oldest child in any family, but especially in one built from trauma and loss. "David," she said, turning in her seat to face him, "can I ask you something?" He nodded, his expression guarded. "Do you feel like you have to take care of everyone?" David was quiet for a long moment. "Someone has to. Dad does his best, but there's only one of him and 5 of us. The little kids need help with things, and Dad's already working harder than anyone should have to. What about what you need?" "What I need doesn't matter as much as what they need." Catherine felt her heart break a little at the matter-of-fact way he said it. "That's not true, David. What you need matters just as much as what your brothers need. You're not responsible for saving everyone. But if you don't help, your dad will figure out another way to manage things. He was taking care of this family before you arrived, and he'd find a way to keep taking care of it if you left for college tomorrow." Jake glanced at Catherine in the rearview mirror, gratitude evident in his expression. This was clearly a conversation David needed to hear from someone other than his father. "The thing is," Catherine continued, "being part of a family means everyone contributes what they can, but it also means everyone gets to be taken care of. You've been so focused on taking care of everyone else that you've forgotten you deserve to be taken care of too." That evening, as Catherine prepared dinner in the main house kitchen, she reflected on her first day at Meadowbrook Ranch. The complexity of the family dynamics was both challenging and fascinating. Each child had specific needs, specific triggers, specific ways of connecting with the world. Jake had created remarkable structure and stability, but he was stretched dangerously thin. The boys returned from school at different times, each bringing their own energy to the house. Louise burst through the door full of excitement about a science project, while Ethan arrived with homework questions and stories about his day. Tommy came home bubbling with enthusiasm about everything from snack time to playground adventures. Marcus appeared last, tired from his emotional morning but pleased to find that his family was intact and unchanged. "How was your first day?" Jake asked Catherine as they cleaned up after dinner. "Eye-opening," Catherine replied honestly. "You've built something extraordinary here, but you're carrying an enormous load. Nothing I can't handle." Catherine studied his face, noting the exhaustion lines around his eyes, the way he moved as if every muscle ached. "Everyone has limits. Jake, even you. Not everyone has 5 kids depending on them." "That's exactly my point. You have 5 kids depending on you, which means you need to take care of yourself so you can keep taking care of them." Before Jake could argue, Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, clutching his stuffed bear and looking anxious. "Dad, I can't find my art supplies. Tomorrow's art therapy, and I wanted to work on my project tonight. They're in the craft room." "Buddy, want me to help you find them?" "Can Ms. Mills help instead?" Marcus asked shyly. "I want to show her my drawings." Catherine felt a warm flutter of surprise at the request. "I'd love to see your art, Marcus." As they walked to the craft room together, Marcus chattering about his current project, Catherine realized something important was happening. These children weren't just accepting her presence, they were beginning to trust her with their individual needs and interests. It was a responsibility she hadn't expected, but found herself eager to embrace. The craft room was a converted bedroom lined with shelves of art supplies, musical instruments, and project materials. Marcus's drawings covered one wall, intricate sketches that revealed remarkable talent for an 8-year-old. "These are incredible, Marcus," Catherine said, studying a detailed drawing of Lightning the horse. "You have a real gift." "My art? Therapist says drawing helps me express feelings I don't have words for yet," Marcus replied, settling at a small table with his supplies. "This one is about feeling safe." He showed her a drawing of the ranch house at sunset, warm lights spilling from the windows and small figures visible inside. The detail and emotion in the piece took Catherine's breath away. "This is beautiful. You've captured the feeling of home perfectly." Marcus beamed at the praise, then grew serious. "Are you going to stay? Really stay, not just until something better comes along?" The question hit Catherine squarely in the chest. "I'm going to try." "Very hard to stay, Marcus. But why do you ask?" "Because Dad tries to take care of everyone by himself, and it makes him tired. And David tries to help, but he gets angry when people are mean about us. And the rest of us need help with things, but we don't want to be too much trouble." Catherine knelt beside Marcus's chair, struck by the 8-year-old's perceptive understanding of his family's dynamics. "You're not too much trouble, Marcus. Taking care of people you love isn't trouble, it's a privilege. Even when we have bad days. Especially when you have bad days, that's when people need the most care and patience." Marcus considered this seriously, then returned to his drawing. "I'm glad you're here, Ms. Mills. The house feels different already." "Different how?" "Calmer. Like maybe Dad doesn't have to carry everything by himself anymore." That night, Catherine sat in her cottage living room, writing in the journal she'd started to document this new chapter of her life. Through the windows, she could see the main house where Jake was helping his sons with homework, supervising baths, and preparing for another day of managed chaos. She thought about Marcus's observation that the house felt calmer, about David's protective anger and sense of overwhelming responsibility, about Jake's stubborn insistence that he could handle anything. These people needed her, but perhaps not in the way she'd originally imagined. She'd expected to be needed for cooking and cleaning, for basic household management. What she hadn't anticipated was being needed for emotional support, for sharing the invisible burden of holding a complex family together, for providing the kind of nurturing presence that helped everyone feel more secure. Her phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Rachel's name appeared on the screen, and Catherine realized she'd been avoiding her family's calls all day. "Hi, Rach. "Catherine, finally, Mom's been worried sick. Where exactly are you, and what's this job you mentioned?" Catherine looked out at the ranch spread before her, at the main house where warm light spilled from the windows and the shadow of a man moved through rooms, checking on sleeping children. "I'm where I need to be," she said simply. "I'm helping a family that needs help, and they're helping me remember who I am." That's very mysterious and not at all reassuring. "I'm safe, Rachel, and for the first time in months, I'm useful. That's enough for now." After ending the call, Catherine returned to her journal, trying to capture the complexity of her first day at Meadowbrook Ranch. She wrote about Marcus's artwork and trust, about David's protective instincts and burden, about Jake's remarkable dedication and dangerous exhaustion. She wrote about feeling needed in ways that went beyond professional skills, about the possibility of healing herself while helping others heal. Outside her window, the ranch settled into the evening quiet. Somewhere in the main house, 5 boys were drifting off to sleep, secure in the knowledge that someone was watching over them. And in the guest cottage, a woman who'd given up on her own dreams of motherhood was discovering that family could take many different forms, and love could grow in the most unexpected places. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Kevin's arrival was still weeks away. David's suspension needed to be addressed. Marcus's therapy continued, and the daily complexity of managing 5 different lives would continue. But tonight, Catherine felt something she hadn't experienced in months. Hope. Maybe Jake Morrison's philosophy of second chances applied to more than just children. Maybe it applied to 42-year-old women who'd lost their way and needed to discover new purposes for their lives. Maybe healing was possible for everyone willing to do the work. As Catherine turned off the lights and prepared for bed, she made a silent promise to the family that had welcomed her. She would learn to be what they needed. She would help carry the load that had been too heavy for one man to bear alone. And she would prove that sometimes the most broken people could become exactly what a healing family needed to become whole. 3 weeks into Catherine's tenure at Meadowbrook Ranch, the November snow arrived early, blanketing the pastures in pristine white and transforming the daily routines. Catherine stood at the kitchen window at 5:30 in the morning, watching Jake trudge through knee-deep drifts toward the barn, his breath creating silver clouds in the frigid air. The man never seemed to rest, never acknowledged the bone-deep exhaustion that was becoming more evident each day. Behind her, the coffee maker gurgled to life, a small rebellion against Jake's insistence on handling every morning task himself. Catherine had gradually assumed responsibility for breakfast preparation, finding that Louise enjoyed teaching her his techniques while Jake focused on the more urgent ranch concerns that winter weather brought. "You're up early again," David's voice came from the stairs, his tone carrying a mixture of appreciation and concern. At 17, he'd appointed himself as the family's early warning system, rising before dawn to help his father with the most demanding chores. "Someone needs to make sure your dad eats something before he heads out into this weather," Catherine replied, pulling ingredients from the refrigerator. "He skipped dinner last night because Tommy had a fever and he was up checking on him every 2 hours. David's expression darkened with familiar worry. "He does that. Forgets he's human when one of us needs something." The previous evening had revealed another layer of Jake's parenting philosophy. Tommy's sudden fever had triggered a carefully orchestrated response: temperature monitoring, comfort measures, contingency plans for school absences, and gentle reassurance for a 5-year-old who still associated illness with abandonment. Jake had managed it all while Catherine watched and learned, noting the way trauma history informed even routine childhood ailments. "Is Tommy feeling better this morning?" Catherine asked, beginning to prepare what had become her signature breakfast. Contribution homemade biscuits that could warm the house and fill 5 growing boys. "Much better. The fever broke around midnight, and he's been asking for pancakes since 6. David moved efficiently through his morning routine, checking that backpacks were ready, permission slips signed, lunch money distributed. Marcus had. Another good night, no nightmares for 6 days straight. Catherine felt a warm flutter of pride at this news. She'd been working quietly with Marcus on bedtime routines, helping him develop coping strategies that supplemented his therapy sessions. Simple things: lavender sachets in his pillow, a special nightlight that projected stars on the ceiling, breathing exercises disguised as games. The kitchen filled with the aroma of baking biscuits as Jake returned from the barn, snow clinging to his coat and exhaustion etched deeply around his eyes. He paused in the doorway, taking in the scene of Catherine and David working together to prepare breakfast while the house remained peaceful around them. "You don't need to do this," he said quietly, but Catherine caught the relief in his voice. "I want to do this," she replied firmly. "Besides, Luis promised to teach me his secret for perfect gravy, and I never break promises to 10-year-old chefs." Luis appeared as if summoned, his hair still messy from sleep, but his expression bright with purpose. "Miss Catherine, you remembered about the gravy lesson." "Of course I did. A promise is a promise." As Luis guided Catherine through the intricacies of breakfast gravy preparation, Jake settled at the table with his coffee, allowing himself a rare moment of rest. Catherine observed him over Luis's enthusiastic explanations, noting the way his shoulders gradually relaxed as he realized breakfast was being handled without his supervision. "The secret is patience," Luis explained seriously, stirring the pan with careful concentration. "You can't rush good gravy, just like Dad says you can't rush good healing." "Your dad is very wise," Catherine agreed, catching Jake's slight smile at his son's unconscious echo of family philosophy. Ethan appeared next, drawn by the smell of baking biscuits and the sound of conversation. At 13, he existed in the complicated space between childhood and adolescence, sometimes eager to help with family responsibilities, other times retreating into teenage moodiness. "Smells incredible in here," he said, settling beside Jake. At the table, "Miss Catherine, Luis has been bragging about teaching you his cooking secrets." "He's an excellent teacher," Catherine replied. "Very patient with students who burn water." "I don't burn water," Catherine protested, laughing. "Close enough," David added with a grin. "Remember the great soup disaster of last Tuesday?" The teasing was gentle and inclusive, and Catherine found herself marveling at how naturally she'd been absorbed into the family's rhythm of affectionate mockery. These boys, despite their traumatic backgrounds, had retained the ability to find joy in small moments and connection through shared experiences. Marcus appeared last, moving slowly but without the defensive tension that had characterized his first weeks at the ranch. The 8-year-old had begun seeking Catherine out for quiet conversations, sharing his artwork and gradually revealing the sharp intelligence behind his carefully guarded exterior. "Good morning, Marcus," Catherine said warmly. "How are you feeling today?" "Better. I dreamed about horses instead of scary things." Marcus settled into his usual chair, immediately reaching for the art supplies Catherine had learned to keep within reach during meals. "Can I show you my new drawing after breakfast?" "I'd love to see it." As the family gathered around the table, Catherine felt the satisfaction of contributing something meaningful to their daily life. The biscuits were golden and flaky, the gravy rich and perfect thanks to Luis's patient instruction, and the conversation flowed naturally among people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. "So what's the plan for today?" David asked, consulting the family calendar that had become Catherine's responsibility to maintain. "Tommy's fever's gone. Marcus has art therapy this afternoon, and I need to make up for that chemistry lab I missed." During my suspension, Jake's expression grew thoughtful. "Actually, I've been thinking we should discuss something as a family. Catherine, this involves you too." Catherine felt a flutter of nervousness. "Oh? I got a call from Helen Crawford yesterday. Kevin Walsh's current placement isn't working out, and they want to move up his arrival date. He could be here as early as this weekend." The kitchen fell silent except for the soft sounds of breakfast being consumed. Catherine watched the boys' faces, noting the mixture of excitement and apprehension that crossed their features. "Is he okay?" Louise asked quietly. "The boy who's coming?" Jake chose his words carefully. "Kevin's had a very difficult time lately. He's been in several different homes in the past year, and none of them have worked out well. He's angry and scared, and he doesn't trust adults very much right now." "Sounds familiar," Ethan said with dark humor. "Remember how I spent my first month here?" "You weren't that bad," Tommy protested loyally. "I threw a plate at Dad's head the second day," Ethan reminded him. "And I told Mrs. Patterson at school that he was probably planning to sell us all for medical experiments." Catherine bit back a smile at this revelation. She was still learning about each boy's individual arrival story, the specific ways their trauma had manifested during those crucial early adjustment periods. "The point is," Jake continued, "Kevin's going to need time and patience from all of us. Catherine, I know we discussed this when you took the job, but having another teenager in the house is going to change the dynamic significantly." "How so?" Catherine asked. David answered before his father could. "Older kids usually have more attitude and bigger problems. Kevin's going to test every boundary we have, probably try to turn the younger boys against Dad, might even try to convince some of us to run away with him." Jake's expression showed a mixture of pride and concern at David's perceptive analysis. "Those are possibilities we need to be prepared for. Kevin's 15, which means he's old enough to influence the younger boys, but not old enough to understand the consequences of his actions." "What do we know about his background?" Catherine asked. "Parents died in a house fire when he was 8. He's been in the system for 7 years, bounced between relatives who couldn't handle him and foster families who gave up too quickly. His last placement lasted 3 months before they said he was too disruptive for their other children." Marcus looked up from his drawing. "Is he mean or is he scared?" The question demonstrated the 8-year-old's growing understanding of human behavior, his ability to recognize that aggression often masked fear. "Both, probably," Jake said gently. "Just like you were when you first came here, remember?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "I bit Mrs. Anderson when she tried to hug me. And now look at you," Catherine said warmly. "You give the best hugs in the family." As if to prove her point, Marcus slipped from his chair to wrap his arms around Catherine's waist, his spontaneous affection still surprising her with its sweetness. "So when is he coming exactly?" David asked, his practical nature asserting itself. "I should probably move some of my stuff out of my room if he's going to share it." "Actually, I've been thinking about that," Jake said. "Catherine, would you mind if we converted part of the guest house into a bedroom for Kevin? Give him some space to adjust without feeling like he's immediately surrounded by family expectations." Catherine considered this proposal, recognizing the wisdom behind it. "That makes sense. He can have privacy while still being close enough for supervision. But where would I stay? There's a small apartment above the barn that I've been meaning to renovate. Basic but private, and still close to the main house. Would that work for you?" The offer touched Catherine deeply. Jake was essentially providing her with a home while making space for another child who needed help. "Are you sure? That seems like a lot of work for you to take on right now." "David and I can handle the renovation," Jake assured her. "Actually, it might be good for him to have a project to focus on during his suspension week." David brightened at the suggestion. "I've been wanting to try some of those carpentry techniques you taught me. And it would be nice to build something instead of just fixing broken things all the time." The conversation continued as they planned. Kevin's arrival, discussing practical concerns like school enrollment, bedroom arrangements, and the gradual integration process Jake had developed for new family members. Catherine found herself impressed by the thoughtfulness of Jake's approach, the way he anticipated challenges and prepared his existing children for the adjustments ahead. After breakfast, as the boys prepared for school and Jake headed out to deal with weather-related ranch issues, Catherine found herself alone with Marcus, who had lingered to show her his latest artwork. "This is new," she said, studying a drawing that showed 6 figures standing in front of the ranch house, clearly meant to represent the complete Morrison family, including Kevin. "I drew it last night when I couldn't sleep," Marcus explained. "I was thinking about how scared the new boy might be, and I wanted to show him that we're not scary." Catherine felt her throat tighten with emotion at the 8-year-old's empathy. "This is beautiful, Marcus. Very thoughtful. Do you think he'll like it here?" Marcus asked, his dark eyes serious. "Or do you think he'll decide we're too weird and ask to leave?" "I think," Catherine said carefully, "that he'll probably be very confused and angry at first, just like you were. But I also think that once he sees how much love there is in this family, he'll start to feel safer." "What if he doesn't want to feel safer?" "Sometimes when I first came here, I didn't want to feel better because it seemed scary to hope for things." Catherine marveled at Marcus's insight into his own psychological journey. "That's very wise, sweetheart. Hope can feel dangerous when you've been disappointed many times. But it gets easier, right? Hoping for good things, it does. Especially when you're surrounded by people who prove that good things can really happen." That afternoon, while Marcus attended his art therapy session, Catherine tackled the guest house reorganization with David's help. The teenager proved to be an efficient and thoughtful partner, carefully considering Kevin's potential needs while maximizing the available space. "We should probably remove anything that could be used as a weapon," David said pragmatically, surveying the decorative items scattered throughout the cottage. "Not because we think he'll hurt anyone, but because kids who've been in the system sometimes destroy things when they feel overwhelmed." "That's smart thinking," Catherine agreed. "What else should we consider?" "Secure the windows so they can't be used for escape attempts, but make sure they don't feel like prison bars. Remove or secure anything valuable that he might try to steal and sell if he decides to run away. And maybe put some art supplies in there. Creative stuff helps when you can't find words for what you're feeling." Catherine was struck by David's intuitive understanding of trauma responses and self-destructive behaviors. "You sound like you speak from experience." David paused in his organization of Kevin's future bedroom. "I tested every boundary Dad set. For the first 6 months I was here. Stole money from his wallet, tried to run away twice, got into fights at school to prove I was too much trouble to keep around. It's hard to believe good things are real when you've only experienced bad things." "What changed for you?" "Dad never gave up. No matter what I did, he'd just clean up the mess and explain why he wasn't sending me away. Eventually, I got tired of testing him and started testing whether I could actually be part of a family." As they worked together preparing Kevin's space, Catherine found herself learning more about David's remarkable resilience and emotional intelligence. Despite being only 17, he developed sophisticated insights into human behavior and trauma recovery. "Can I ask you something personal?" Catherine said as they arranged furniture to create a comfortable but secure environment. "Sure. Do you ever resent Jake for taking in so many kids? Do you ever wish you could have his attention to yourself?" David considered the question seriously. "Sometimes. But then I look at Marcus or Tommy or Louise and I remember what it felt like to think nobody wanted me. Dad's attention is finite, but his love isn't. There's always enough love to go around." The profound maturity of this perspective took Catherine's breath away. "That's a beautiful way to think about it. Besides," David added with a slight smile, "having siblings is pretty great, even when they're annoying. I never had brothers before. Now I can't imagine life without them." That evening, as the family gathered for dinner, Catherine observed the easy camaraderie among the boys, the way they supported and teased each other with equal enthusiasm. Luz described his violin lesson with passionate detail, while Ethan mock complained about his little brother's musical obsession. Tommy chattered about his pre-K adventures while Marcus listened with the patience of someone who remembered being the youngest and newest family member. "Kevin's going to fit right in," Tommy announced with 5-year-old confidence. "We're good at helping new kids feel better." "It might take some time," Jake cautioned gently. "Kevin's older than you were when you came here, and older kids sometimes have a harder time adjusting." "That's okay," Ethan said. "We're patient, right, Marcus?" Marcus nodded solemnly. "It took me a long time to stop hiding under my bed. Kevin can take as long as he needs." Catherine felt overwhelming affection for these children who'd transformed their own pain into compassion for others. Despite their difficult backgrounds, they developed an extraordinary capacity for empathy and acceptance. Later that evening, after the boys were settled in their rooms and Jake was making his final rounds of the ranch, Catherine found herself standing in what would soon be Kevin's bedroom. She tried to imagine a 15-year-old boy seeing this space for the first time. Would he appreciate the thoughtful preparation, or would he view it as another temporary stop in a series of disappointments? A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Jake appeared in the doorway, looking slightly less exhausted than usual. "Penny for your thoughts," he said, surveying the transformed space. "I was thinking about Kevin, wondering what he's feeling right now, knowing he's about to be moved again." Jake joined her in the middle of the room, probably angry, scared, and convinced that this placement will fail too. Most kids who've been in the system as long as Kevin have learned to expect disappointment. How do you break through that kind of defensive cynicism? Very carefully, very patiently, and with a lot of help from people who understand what he's been through. Jake's eyes met Catherine's. "Having you here is going to make a huge difference for Kevin. You bring something to this family that I can't provide alone." "What's that?" "Balance, maternal instincts, a different perspective on healing and growth." Jake paused, seeming to choose his words carefully. "The boys have been different since you arrived, Catherine. More settled, more confident. David's been sleeping better. Marcus hasn't had a nightmare in almost a week, and even Ethan's been more willing to talk about his feelings." Catherine felt warmth spread through her chest at this assessment. "They've been different for me too. I came here thinking I'd lost my purpose, but they've helped me discover new ways to nurture and care for people." "About that," Jake said, his tone becoming more serious, "I need you to know that Kevin's arrival might test everyone's patience, including yours. He might say cruel things, reject every kindness, try to turn the other boys against us. Are you prepared for that possibility?" Catherine thought about her 15 years in pediatric nursing, the difficult children she'd worked with, the families in crisis she'd supported. "I've dealt with angry, frightened children before. I know that challenging behavior usually comes from pain, not malice. Kevin's pain runs very deep. 7 years in the system, multiple failed placements, no stable adult relationships. He's going to fight against every attempt to help him. Then we'll keep trying until he stops fighting." "That's what family does, right?" Jake's expression softened. "That's exactly what family does." As they stood together in the quiet room, Catherine felt the weight of the commitment she was making. Kevin Walsh would arrive soon, bringing his anger and fear and desperate need for stability. The family dynamics would shift again, requiring new patience, new strategies, new reserves of love and understanding. But looking around at what they'd created, a safe space for a wounded child, prepared by people who understood the journey from trauma to healing, Catherine felt confident that Meadowbrook Ranch could handle whatever challenges Kevin brought with him. The sound of Marcus calling for help with his bedtime routine interrupted their conversation. Catherine followed the voice toward the main house, where a little boy was waiting for assistance with his breathing exercises and goodnight rituals. "Coming, sweetheart," she called back, and felt the familiar flutter of purpose that had become such an important part of her new life. Tomorrow would bring Kevin Walsh and all the complications his arrival would entail. But tonight, Catherine was exactly where she belonged in a family that specialized in healing broken hearts and proving that love could triumph over even the deepest wounds. As she helped Marcus settle into sleep, the 8-year-old's breathing gradually deepening into peaceful rest, Catherine whispered a quiet prayer for the troubled teenager who would soon join their unconventional family. Kevin Walsh was about to discover what David and Marcus and Louise and Ethan and Tommy had already learned, that sometimes the most unexpected places could become home, and sometimes the most broken people could become exactly what a healing family needed to become whole. The foundation they'd been building over the past 3 weeks felt solid beneath them. Now it was time to see if it could support the weight of one more wounded soul seeking redemption in the Montana wilderness. Kevin Walsh arrived on a bitter December afternoon, stepping out of Helen Crawford's sedan like a caged animal finally released into unfamiliar territory. Catherine watched from the kitchen window as the 15-year-old surveyed Meadowbrook Ranch with calculating eyes, his posture radiating defiance and barely contained rage. Everything about him screamed wariness from the way he kept his distance. From Jake's extended hand to how his gaze swept the property as if mapping escape routes. "He's smaller than I expected," David observed quietly, joining Catherine at the window. The 17-year-old had appointed himself as Kevin's unofficial welcome committee, despite Jake's warnings about giving the new arrival space to adjust. "Smaller but not weaker," Catherine replied, noting the wiry strength in Kevin's frame, and the way he held himself ready for confrontation. "Look at his eyes, he's evaluating everything as either a threat or an opportunity." Helen Crawford's conversation with Jake carried on the porch, their voices too low to hear, but their body language telling a story of concern and careful instruction. Catherine had learned that these transition meetings involved detailed briefings about triggers, medications, legal restrictions, and the complex web of rules that governed foster placements. Inside the main house, the Morrison boys had arranged themselves with strategic casualness throughout the living areas. Luis practiced violin scales in the music room with unusual intensity, his nervous energy channeled into complicated fingering exercises. Ethan and Tommy engaged in an elaborate chess game at the kitchen table, their moves deliberate and their conversation artificially animated. Marcus had positioned himself in the corner with his art supplies, sketching with focused concentration while keeping one eye on the windows. "Everyone's trying so hard to look normal," Catherine observed with a mixture of affection and concern. "They want Kevin to see a functional family, but they're all wound up tight as springs. Can you blame them?" David asked. "A new kid changes everything. We've all been through it from both sides, being the new one and watching someone else join the family. It's terrifying every time." The front door opened, and Jake's voice carried into the kitchen as he guided Kevin inside. "This is the main house where we have meals together and spend family time. Your room is in the guest cottage, which gives you privacy while keeping you close enough to join us when you're ready." Kevin's response was inaudible, but his tone carried. Clearly flat, hostile, designed to shut down conversation before it could begin. Catherine felt her heart clench with recognition. She'd heard that exact tone from dozens of children over the years, the verbal armor that protected wounded souls from further disappointment. "Kevin, I'd like you to meet Catherine Mills," Jake continued as they entered the kitchen. "She helps manage the household and works with all of us to keep things running smoothly." Catherine turned from the window to face their newest family member, taking in his appearance with professional assessment. Kevin was indeed smaller than expected for 15, probably undernourished, and certainly exhausted. His dark hair needed cutting, his clothes were clean but ill-fitting, and his green eyes held the kind of premature cynicism that broke her heart. "Hello, Kevin," she said warmly but without overwhelming enthusiasm. "Welcome to Meadowbrook Ranch." Kevin's gaze flicked over her dismissively before returning to Jake. "How long before you people get tired of playing house and send me back?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, designed to provoke exactly the kind of reassurances that Kevin could then dismiss as lies. Catherine caught Jake's slight. Not a signal that he wanted her to let him handle this particular confrontation. "That depends entirely on you," Jake replied calmly. "This placement is permanent if you want it to be. If you decide you'd rather be somewhere else, we'll work with Helen to find alternatives." Kevin's expression flickered with surprise at the unexpected response. Most adults would have offered immediate reassurances about never giving up, about this being his forever home, regardless of his behavior. Jake's honest acknowledgement that Kevin had choices seemed to throw him off balance. "What's the catch?" Kevin asked suspiciously. "Nobody keeps problem kids without getting something out of it." Before Jake could respond, Marcus appeared in the kitchen doorway, clutching his latest drawing. The 8-year-old approached Kevin with the fearless directness that only young children possessed. "I made this for you," Marcus said, extending a carefully detailed sketch of the ranch house surrounded by trees and animals. "It shows all the places that are safe here." Kevin stared down at the artwork, his defensive mask slipping slightly as he took in the intricate details and obvious effort involved. "Why?" "Because I remember being scared when I first came here. I wanted you to know that some of us understand what it feels like." The interaction lasted only moments, but Catherine saw something shift in Kevin's expression, a crack in the armor that revealed the frightened child beneath the angry teenager. Marcus had managed to accomplish what adult reassurances couldn't. Genuine connection based on shared experience. "Thanks," Kevin muttered, accepting the drawing with awkward care. "It's good." "Marcus is our resident artist," Jake explained, guiding Kevin toward the living areas where the other boys waited. "Everyone here has talents they're developing. Part of figuring out this family is discovering what you're good at and what brings you joy." The introduction process continued with carefully orchestrated casualness. Luis demonstrated his violin skills with a brief piece that showcased both talent and discipline. Ethan explained the chess game he'd been playing with Tommy, offering to teach Kevin the strategies he'd learned. Tommy simply beamed with 5-year-old enthusiasm, announcing that Kevin could share his toys and help feed the chickens whenever he wanted. David's introduction was more substantial, delivered with the authority of someone who'd successfully navigated the transition from angry newcomer to trusted family member. "I've been here 3 years, he told Kevin matter-of-factly. "First year sucked because I spent all my time waiting for everything to fall apart. Second year was better because I started believing this might actually work. Third year was good because I stopped waiting for disaster and started planning for the future." Kevin absorbed this information silently, his analytical mind clearly processing the timeline and implications. Catherine found herself admiring David's strategic approach, offering hope without minimizing the difficulty of adjustment. "What kind of future?" Kevin asked, the first question he'd posed that didn't sound like a challenge. "College, maybe. Or staying here and learning ranch management from Dad. Options, basically. That's what this place gives you, time to figure out who you want to become instead of just surviving who you are right now." The tour continued with Jake explaining the ranch operations, the daily routines, the expectations and freedoms that came with being part of the Morrison family. Kevin listened with apparent indifference, but Catherine noticed how his attention sharpened when Jake discussed the practical aspects of ranch life, the work that needed doing, the skills that could be learned, the ways each family member contributed to their collective success. "What would I do here?" Kevin asked as they returned to the main house. "What's my job supposed to be?" "That depends on your interests and abilities," Jake replied. "We'll start with basic responsibilities, keeping your space clean, helping with meals, learning animal care. As you get more comfortable, we can explore what you enjoy and what you're good at." "And if I'm not good at anything?" The question revealed more vulnerability than Kevin probably intended. Catherine recognized the fear behind it, the terror of being found inadequate. of confirming his worst suspicions about his own worth. Everyone's good at something, Jake said firmly. Sometimes it just takes time to discover what that something is. That evening, after Kevin had been shown to his cottage and left to settle in alone, the Morrison family gathered for their first dinner without their newest member. The boys were full of observations and questions about their new brother, their excitement tempered by concern for his obvious pain. "He seems really angry," Tommy observed with 5-year-old directness. "Angrier than Marcus was when he came here." "Different kind of angry," Ethan corrected thoughtfully. "Marcus was scared angry. Kevin's more like ... hurt angry, like he's mad at the whole world for being unfair. Can you blame him?" Louise asked quietly. 7 years in the system, multiple failed placements. I'd be furious too. Catherine listened to the boys' analysis with growing respect for their emotional intelligence. These children, despite their youth, had developed sophisticated understanding of trauma responses and coping mechanisms. "What's our strategy?" David asked, addressing the question to both Jake and Catherine. "How do we help him adjust without pushing too hard?" "Patience," Jake replied. "Consistency. And proving through actions that this family operates differently than whatever he's experienced before." "What about school?" Catherine asked. "He's probably behind academically, and social integration is going to be challenging. I've arranged for him to start after the holidays. Gives him a few weeks to settle in here before adding that stress." Jake's expression grew thoughtful. "Helen mentioned that Kevin's extremely bright, but has refused to apply himself in previous placements. Classic pattern for kids who've given up on the future. Maybe he just needs someone to believe in his potential," Catherine suggested. "Sometimes children stop trying because they've learned that effort leads to disappointment." Over the following days, Kevin maintained careful distance from the family while observing their routines with predatory attention. He emerged from his cottage for meals but contributed little to conversation. He accepted assigned chores without complaint, but showed no enthusiasm for ranch life. Most tellingly, he seemed to be testing boundaries through subtle provocations, leaving messes for others to clean, forgetting to complete tasks, responding to kindness with barely concealed hostility. Catherine found herself fascinated by Kevin's strategic approach to rebellion. Unlike the explosive acting out that characterized many traumatized teenagers, Kevin's resistance was calculated and controlled. He was gathering information about family dynamics while positioning himself as too much trouble to keep long-term. "He's waiting for us to give up on him," she observed to Jake after a particularly tense breakfast where Kevin had ignored direct questions and responded to Tommy's friendly overtures with cold dismissal. "I know. Question is whether we can outlast his need to test us." The breakthrough came unexpectedly during Kevin's second week at the ranch. Catherine was working in the barn, cleaning stalls and checking on the horses, when she became aware of being watched. Kevin stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable as he observed her work. "Need something?" Catherine asked without stopping her mucking rhythm. "Jake said I should learn to take care of the animals. Figured I'd watch and see what's involved." It was the longest sentence Kevin had spoken since his arrival, delivered with studied casualness that didn't quite hide genuine interest. "Want to help?" Catherine offered. "Lightning here is very patient with beginners." Kevin approached the gentle Mare's stall with cautious respect, his body language revealing someone who'd had limited positive experiences with animals. Catherine demonstrated proper grooming techniques while explaining Lightning's personality and care requirements. "She's the horse Tommy learned on," Catherine explained as Kevin tentatively stroked the Mare's neck. "Very forgiving of mistakes, good at reading human emotions." "How can a horse read emotions?" "Watch her ears and eyes when different people approach. She responds differently to confidence versus fear, calmness versus agitation. Animals are often better at reading humans than humans are at reading each other." Kevin spent the next hour learning basic horse care, his questions becoming more frequent and less guarded as his genuine interest overcame his defensive suspicions. Catherine found herself impressed by his quick learning and intuitive understanding of animal behavior. "You're a natural at this," she commented as Kevin successfully brushed Lightning's coat with growing confidence. "Yeah, right," Kevin replied, but his tone lacked its usual bitter edge. "I'm serious. Look how relaxed she is with you." Horses don't lie about whether they trust someone. For the first time since his arrival, Kevin smiled a brief, genuine expression that transformed his entire face. "She's pretty cool. Better than most people I've met." "Animals can be easier to trust than humans," Catherine agreed. "They don't have hidden agendas or complicated motivations. They're honest about what they need and what they're feeling." The conversation continued as they worked together, Kevin gradually revealing glimpses of the intelligent, perceptive young man beneath his defensive armor. He asked thoughtful questions about ranch operations, showed genuine concern for animal welfare, and demonstrated surprising knowledge about various subjects. "Where did you learn so much about different topics?" Catherine asked as Kevin displayed understanding of everything from veterinary care to mechanical engineering. "Libraries," Kevin replied with a shrug. "When you move around a lot, books are the only constant. Plus, knowledge is useful. Never know when you might need to know something." Catherine recognized the survival strategy acquiring information as a form of security, building intellectual resources that couldn't be taken away by unstable living situations. That evening, Kevin joined the family for dinner and actually participated in conversation. He answered Luce's questions about his musical preferences, engaged with Ethan's discussion about chess strategy, and showed surprising patience with Tommy's endless chatter about his pre-K adventures. "How was your day?" Jake asked Kevin directly, the first time he'd posed such a personal question. "Okay," Kevin replied. Then after a pause, "Catherine taught me about horse care. Lightning's a good horse." "She is," Jake agreed. "Think you'd like to take on some of the animal care responsibilities?" Kevin's expression grew cautious, as if sensing a trap. "What kind of responsibilities?" "Daily feeding, grooming, basic health checks. Nothing you can't handle. And David. Or I would supervise until you're comfortable working independently. What happens if I mess up?" The question revealed Kevin's core fear that mistakes would lead to rejection, that imperfection would prove he didn't deserve stability. "Then we teach you how to do it better next time," Jake replied simply. "Mistakes are how we learn. They're not failures unless we refuse to learn from them." Kevin considered this response carefully, his analytical mind processing the implications. "And if I decide I don't want to do it anymore?" "Then we find something else you do want to do." The goal isn't to force you into specific roles, Kevin. It's to help you discover what you enjoy and what you're good at. Over the following weeks, Kevin's transformation accelerated as he found his place within the family structure. His natural intelligence and mechanical aptitude revealed themselves through various projects around the ranch. He repaired a broken gate mechanism that had been problematic for months, figured out why the barn's ventilation system wasn't working properly, and developed an improved feeding schedule that optimized the animal's health and growth. "Kid's got an engineer's brain," Jake observed to Catherine as they watched Kevin explain his gate repair solution to David. "He sees problems systematically and develops elegant solutions." "He also has natural leadership qualities," Catherine added, noting how the younger boys had begun seeking Kevin's input on various projects. Marcus asked him for help with a mechanical drawing yesterday, and Kevin spent an hour teaching him about perspective and proportion. The relationship between Kevin and Marcus had become particularly meaningful to watch. The 8-year-old's artistic nature complemented Kevin's mechanical interests, creating opportunities for collaboration that benefited both boys. Marcus was learning practical skills while Kevin discovered the satisfaction of teaching and mentoring. "I think Kevin's finally starting to believe this might work," David confided to Catherine one evening as they observed Kevin helping Tommy with a puzzle. He stopped asking when we're going to get tired of him. What changed your mind about him? Catherine asked. I know you were skeptical at first. He fixed my truck, David replied with a grin. Spent 3 hours diagnosing a problem that had stumped me for weeks, then explained the solution so clearly that I understood exactly what had been wrong. Anyone who can do that and still has patience for Tommy's questions is okay in my book. The holiday season brought new challenges and opportunities for Kevin's integration. Catherine worked with Jake to include Kevin in Christmas preparations, while respecting his possible triggers around family traditions and gift-giving. They discovered that Kevin had remarkable artistic abilities when he volunteered to help Marcus design homemade Christmas cards for the extended family. I never made Christmas presents before, Kevin admitted as he worked on an intricate wooden ornament in the ranch workshop. Never had anyone to make them for. Well, you do now, Luis replied matter-of-factly. We all make things for each other. It's more fun than buying stuff. Catherine watched Kevin's face as he absorbed this simple statement about belonging, about having people who cared enough to receive his handmade gifts. The teenager's emotional walls continued to crumble as he experienced the reality of unconditional family membership. The true test came during Kevin's first month when he made a significant mistake leaving a gate unlatched that allowed several cattle to wander into the neighboring property. The error required hours of work to correct and could have resulted in serious problems if not discovered quickly. Kevin's reaction was immediate and telling. He packed his few belongings and prepared to leave before facing consequences. Catherine found him sitting on his cottage steps with his duffel bag, his face set in familiar lines of defensive resignation. Where are you planning to go? She asked, settling beside him on the steps. Doesn't matter. Just away from here before Jake decides he's had enough. What makes you think Jake's had enough? Kevin gestured toward the pasture where Jake and David were still working to gather the scattered cattle. I screwed up. Cost them time and money and probably embarrassed them with the neighbors. That's exactly the kind of thing that gets kids sent back. Catherine studied Kevin's profile, recognizing the self-protective mechanism that had kept him safe through multiple failed placements. Kevin, look at me. When he reluctantly met her eyes, she continued, in the 3 years I've known this family, I've seen David crash the truck into a fence post. Louise accidentally poison half the vegetable garden with too much fertilizer. Ethan release all the chickens because he forgot to latch their coop. Marcus flood the barn trying to fix a broken water pipe, and Tommy somehow managed to get his head stuck in the pasture fence. Every single time, Jake's response was the same. Figure out what went wrong. Fix the immediate problem and learn how to prevent it from happening again. That's different. They're his real kids. You're his real kid too, Kevin. The adoption papers are in process, remember? You're not a temporary guest or a trial placement. You're a Morrison, which means you get to make mistakes and learn from them, just like everyone else in this family. Kevin was quiet for a long moment, processing this perspective. What if I keep messing up? Then you'll keep learning. That's what families do. They stick together through the learning process. The sound of footsteps interrupted their conversation as Jake approached the cottage, his expression serious but not angry. Kevin tensed, clearly preparing for the confrontation he'd been dreading. Kevin, Jake said, settling on the steps beside them, we need to talk about what happened today. I know I screwed up, Kevin said quickly. I'm sorry, and I'll understand if you want to. Stop, Jake interrupted gently. Take a breath and listen to me. Kevin fell silent, his body rigid. With expectation, you made a mistake, Jake continued. A costly one that required time and effort to fix. That's not acceptable, and it can't happen again. But it's also not grounds for giving up on you or sending you away. Kevin's confusion was evident in his expression. It's not? No, it's grounds for making sure you understand gate safety procedures. better and developing habits that prevent similar mistakes. David's going to work with you on creating checklists for daily responsibilities, and I'm going to show you how to double-check all security measures. That's it? Just ... more training? What did you expect? To be sent back? To be told I'm in too much trouble? To prove that I can't handle responsibility? Jake's expression grew gentle with understanding. Kevin, being part of this family means you get to fail sometimes without losing your place here. It means we help you learn from mistakes instead of punishing you for making them. That's what love does. It creates safe spaces for growth. Catherine watched Kevin's face as he processed this radical concept, his entire worldview shifting to accommodate the possibility of unconditional belonging. When he finally spoke, his voice was thick with emotion. I've never been in a place where mistakes didn't end everything. Well, you are now, Jake said firmly. Welcome to the Morrison family, Kevin. Population: 6 kids, 1 dad, 1 Catherine, and whatever animals we're currently housing. All of us are learning as we go, all of us committed to figuring it out together. As the 3 of them sat on the cottage steps in the gathering dusk, Catherine felt the profound satisfaction of witnessing transformation. Kevin Walsh had arrived at Meadowbrook Ranch as an angry, defensive teenager convinced of his own unworthiness. Through patience, consistency, and genuine love, the Morrison family had helped him discover his potential and believe in his future. The foundation they'd built over the past month's trust, understanding, shared purpose had proven strong enough to support even Kevin's extensive wounds. As winter deepened around them and the ranch settled into its seasonal rhythms, Catherine knew they were ready for whatever challenges lay ahead. 6 boys now called Meadowbrook Ranch home, each carrying their own story of resilience and growth. Together, they were creating something beautiful from the broken pieces of their individual pasts, proving that families could be built from choice and commitment just as powerfully as from blood and genetics. The transformation was far from complete, but the foundation was solid. Love had taken root in Montana soil, and it was growing stronger every day. February brought a surprise state inspection to Meadowbrook Ranch. 2 stern officials emerged from their sedan with clipboards and suspicious expressions. Anonymous complaint about overcrowding and inadequate supervision. The lead inspector announced coldly. Catherine's heart sank. Someone had deliberately targeted their family. The inspection was thorough. Officials examined every room and questioned each child separately. Dr. Mills, the inspector said, leaving medical practice for ranch work raises questions about your motivations. Some might think you're using these children to fulfill unmet maternal needs. Before Catherine could respond, Kevin stepped forward. That's backwards, he said firmly. Catherine doesn't use us. She shows up every day, helps with our problems, never asks for anything except that we try our best. The other boys rallied to defend their family. Marcus showed artwork documenting his progress. Luis played violin pieces Catherine had encouraged. Tommy declared Catherine made the best pancakes and always listened. David's testimony proved most powerful. I was planning to skip college to help Dad. Catherine convinced me my dreams mattered too. She helped me apply for scholarships and believe I deserved a future. That's genuine love, not personal fulfillment. The turning point came when an inspector asked Marcus about his nightmares. I used to have them every night, Marcus explained. But Catherine taught me breathing exercises. Now I mostly dream about horses and art projects. The officials departed with a glowing report praising the family's stability and Catherine's positive impact. 2 weeks later, Margaret Henderson arrived with a lawyer and custody papers for Tommy. I'm his blood relative, Margaret announced coldly. I can provide a proper family environment better than this situation. Tommy's face crumpled with terror. I don't want to go. I want to stay with my family. These people aren't your family, Margaret replied harshly. Kevin stepped forward with quiet authority. Blood doesn't make a family. Love does. Commitment does. Showing up every day that makes family. The legal battle tested everyone's resolve. Margaret had resources and traditional family arguments. Jake had love and stability. But courts often favored blood relatives. Catherine served as emotional anchor during depositions and hearings, helping the boys understand while managing their fears. "What if they take Tommy?" Marcus asked anxiously. "Then we fight harder," David replied fiercely. "Tommy belongs here." The custody hearing examined their unconventional structure. Margaret's lawyer painted Jake as overwhelmed and Catherine as unqualified, but their unity proved unshakable. Each boy testified about feeling safe and loved at Meadowbrook Ranch. Tommy's testimony decided everything. "Jake is my daddy now," he said simply. "He reads me stories and helps with scary feelings. Margaret is nice, but she doesn't know about my nightmares or how I like my pancakes." The judge ruled in their favor. This child has found stability and love. Disrupting that for blood relation wouldn't serve his welfare. Spring brought renewal to Meadowbrook Ranch. David received college acceptance with full scholarship. Kevin became a natural leader learning ranch management. Marcus's art gained gallery interest. Lise joined the youth orchestra. Ethan discovered environmental science. Tommy completely overcame his struggles. One evening, Jake handed Catherine a velvet box. "You became the heart of our family. I can't imagine life without you. Will you marry me?" "Yes," she whispered through joyful tears. The ranch wedding 6 months later celebrated their triumph. All 6 boys served as groomsmen, watching their parents exchange vows with pride. "We promise to continue building this family with love," Catherine vowed, creating a home where everyone feels valued. During their first dance, Catherine reflected on the journey. She'd arrived seeking employment and found her calling. These difficult children had proven capable of extraordinary love. "What are you thinking about?" Jake asked. "Everything. I thought my life was over because I couldn't have biological children. Now I know it was just beginning differently." The lonely rancher had found his missing piece. The woman told she was too old to bear children and discovered she was perfect for raising the ones who needed her most. Together, they created something beautiful, a family bound by choice, commitment, and transformative love. Meadowbrook Ranch stood as proof that families come in many forms. Healing is possible at any age, and sometimes the most unexpected journeys lead to extraordinary destinations. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.